Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Acquisitions Anonymous. I'm Snell, joined today by Bill D'Alessandro and Heather Endresen. We talk about a really interesting, what we think is a contract manufacturing skincare provider. I think they probably white label stuff and maybe make it for themselves and make it for other people, but it's quite large, a little over $3 million in EBITDA. We talk about some of the nuances with that segment of the market, who you'd be up against, how do you even finance and buy a business like that, and what are their dynamics? And then we talk about kind of the strengths of this type of provider relative to people who sit lower in the value chain and people who sit maybe higher in the value chain, like the brands that are selling these things that are being made by this company. Super interesting. Bill and Heather have really interesting insight, and it's a fun conversation. We riff a little bit on a few different topics, but hope you enjoy, and big thanks to our sponsors this week. Thanks for tuning in. Welcome back, everybody. Another episode of Acquisitions Anonymous. Snell joined by Bill D'Alessandro and Heather Endresen. Hey guys, how's it going?
Very good.
Doing great.
Psyched to be here. I was off last week, so I feel like I hadn't seen you guys in forever.
I know you look just as chipper, Bill. And we have an amazing deal. We have an amazing deal. Yes. Anytime I see something that is e-commerce related, or as you call it, lotions and potions, I'm like, I can't wait to see what Bill thinks about this. And we have a good kind of upmarket deal today on one of those.
All right. You want me to get into it?
Yeah. Take us away.
Cool. So fun thing about this deal is I found this one on Axial. It's axial.net. Everybody in kind of SMB land knows about BizBySell, and everybody goes BizBySell. But Axial, if you think, it's sort of like a more professional, like bigger version of BizBySell. So I really like Axial for kind of more professional, larger deals. We've talked on this at length, this podcast, about how smaller deals are hard, but it can be hard to find bigger deals. We've been trying to do bigger deals on the pod, and I find a good bit of them on Axial. So this one is from Axial. So it is a manufacturer.
And I'll just say one thing about that,
yeah,
Bill, really quick. Like, if you think about it, when I was in the private equity space, BizBySell is where brokers list deals. And if you want to look at kind of slightly higher end of the lower middle market, most business brokers list stuff on their website or on BizBySell. Most investment bankers don't list stuff, but if they do and they want to put it out in any kind of database, it's usually Axial. That, at least from what I saw.
Yep, that's true. And it works a little different too. And I think this is, I guess, why investment bankers feel comfortable with it, is that it's sort of like opt-in. Like, you have to like apply to get the information released to you. And there's sort of a higher bar, like they vet you a little bit. So I think that's why they feel comfortable. Cool. So this one's fun because, as you said, lotions and potions. So this is a manufacturer and distributor of vegan cosmetics and skincare brand. Founded in 1994, the company is a market-leading international vegan cosmetics and skincare brand. They develop, manufacture, and distribute all products from their state-of-the-art facility in the southeastern United States. So this is lotions and potion, and it's in my backyard. How exciting. The company specializes in the highlighter and liquid lipstick segment of the beauty catalog. They have managed to stand out from competitors due to their unique production process and their self-reliant manufacturing ecosystem set up over the years. The company's mission has helped bolster its reputation amongst consumers and influencers internationally. Several product collections are curated in partnership with top influencers who help showcase products, maintain brand image, and interact with customers for feedback. Oh, there's so much here. The company has a solid track record and a great operating team in place. The owner is looking for a partner to help take the business through its next level of growth. Financials. We have 3 years of financials here. Well, actually 4 years of financials. 2023 revenue and EBITDA are $12.2 million on the top line and $3 million of EBITDA on the bottom line. So 20% EBITDA margin. And the company has grown at about 11%, grown revenue at about 11% year over year, each of the past 2 years. But it looks like they had a weird COVID bump or something, because they went from, in 2020, they did $17.5 million in revenue. And then they dropped back to $12.2 million in revenue in 2021. And it looks like just stayed there. I wonder if this is a typo, but it looks like they just stayed at exactly 12.2 million every single year for 3 years in a row. And yet the sim lists 11% year over year growth. So I have
Year-over-year growth. Yeah.
Questions about
Yeah. I
that.
think it's that revenue line item that must be wrong. Cause then there's 11% growth in 2023 also.
Yeah, something's wrong with the
And
revenue
it
line
still
item.
says 12.2.
But it looks like,
Yeah.
so they go from 3.4 of EBITDA in 2020 to 3.3 in 2021 to 2.9 in 2022 to 3.0 in 2023 estimated. So I definitely think there's some sort of COVID bump going on that seems to now have normalized, which is, at least, thank goodness, it's 2023. I was really getting tired of being like, what's going to happen post COVID? At least we can actually see what's happened.
I agree. As a lender, we've all been sort of it was so difficult to sort of project out what was going to happen. And now it's very easy. Did it normalize or did it not normalize? And did we keep the bump or did we lose some of it? It's so much easier now to look at deals.
Yes. For like years, every episode, we were like, what's going to happen? But it looks like this one has roughly stabilized around 3 million. They're in the South Atlantic, and their industries are blushes, face and manufacturing, cosmetic creams, lotions, and oils manufacturing, eye makeup, foundations, lipsticks manufacturing, cosmetics and beauty product e-commerce, and then cosmetics and distributors, wholesalers. So, Heather and Mills, what do y'all think about this one?
I like it. First of all, I like the category. I do recognize that you know more about it than I do as far as e-com and skincare and cosmetics. I think it's a very competitive space, and it might be a little tricky to maintain the level of sales and the margins because of that. But I otherwise like the business. It's got, I guess it seems to have some scale to me, based on the numbers that we're looking at. You're at 3 million of EBITDA. Decent margins. I wish I understood a little bit better what was going on with the sales, with the top line there.
I wonder too, this is one of those cases where you really want to see 2019 because like, I wonder if 2018 and 2019 were in this like 15, 16, $17 million range. And then they just had a step function change in, loss, deceleration, not growth. And the business just contracted top line, like we've said, in COVID, everybody's like, I don't know, people aren't buying makeup. And, will they ever buy makeup again? Will people ever fly on airplanes again or, eat at Golden Corral and use the chocolate fondue fountain? But I was at Golden Corral the other day telling on myself and people are still using the chocolate fondue fountain. So everything has bounced back that you thought never would.
God bless America, Mills.
You would, yes. And Golden Corral is busy at like 3 p.m. on Wednesdays. So I don't, they're doing something right.
The chocolate fondue fountain is obviously
what
it is. That's what they're doing right.
Yeah.
It has to be.
But you want to know what was happening in this business because, maybe typos aside, either they had a booming 2020, which wouldn't make a ton of sense because of their category, or, maybe they've had just kind of a loss. Maybe they've lost a category or lost a big customer or something like that. You don't know till you put back the layers. The business is 30 years old though. It's impressive. I think I probably misspoke. I don't get the sense that they're actually doing any e-commerce. Maybe they are. We don't really know. They say manufacturer and distributor, which, Bill, from the little bit that I've seen, but a lot more that I've heard and learned from you, most people are not manufacturing this stuff. Most people are contract manufacturing and putting their own labels on it. So I would have a lot of questions around like, do they run a manufacturing plant?
I believe they do
for this stuff.
Yes, I believe they do.
Yeah.
I believe this is a contract manufacturer, and there's something that's worth knowing about their product categories: the highlighter and the liquid lipstick. So these types of products are what's called hot fill. So it has to be at room temperature. It's solid, right? Think of a tube of lipstick, right? So you have to fill it hot while it's warm. And as it runs through all the tubes and machines, the tubes have jackets on them that keep them warm so it doesn't gunk up, right? And what's interesting is, well, because of that, there's a real pain in the butt to doing a small run because the cleanup, the setup and teardown, right? To get all the now cooled off lipstick out of the inside of the tubes, all that stuff, right? The setup teardown is crappy. And I know this because I've done hot fill products and I still do some hot fill products. And we when we were getting started had to manufacture them in-house because almost no contract manufacturers want to do small runs. So it is almost impossible to start small with a hot fill product. So you have to cannonball into 100,000 ounces or something right away. And typically these products are 1 ounce sizes. So it's like 100,000 pieces initial inventory run. There's capital requirements there, right? So I'm betting that since these guys have been around a while, they are a contract manufacturer who has then leveraged that hot fill capability into starting their own brand, if I had to guess. Because really the only way you can start a hot fill brand without a bunch of capital is to already own the hot fill manufacturing, right? Or pony up for the big initial order.
And it seems like they would have the distribution then, through, they talk about like influencers and stuff, which obviously is a relatively new phenomenon, but an awesome distribution channel. If you have all the infrastructure and you go to some influencers and say, hey, would you like your own brand of, blushes and creams and lotions and eye makeup, that is like a match made in heaven, because they're like, we don't want to maintain the social media. We don't want to maintain the e-commerce. We'll sell you these batches. And, they all get to kind of extract margin along the way.
So if it's a mix maybe of contract manufacturing, maybe they're making other brands as well as their own brand. You kind of probably have two different margins going on here, and it would be interesting to know then what's the mix. Is it 50-50? Probably not, right? I would guess, like, if your hunch is correct, Bill, it's probably mostly the manufacturing. That's most of the revenue, and maybe the skincare brand has higher margins, but it's maybe only, I'm just going to make up a number, 30% of the revenue. And so it would be interesting to sort of break it out by margin and revenue and kind of see, it's almost like maybe two businesses in one.
That's exact. I'm sure it's two businesses in one.
Mm-hmm.
And what would be interesting is whether they insist on selling them together, because there are a ton of buyers who have no interest in running a hot fill plant, right? They just want the brand and they want a contract manufacturer, product. There are also separate people who want to run a hot fill plant and don't know jack about the internet. We tried to buy a pet supplements business, and it was very hard for us because they ran their own manufacturing facility in Tennessee. And I didn't want to do that, right? We just wanted the brand. So we were saying to the owner, we just want to buy the brand. You keep the facility and become our contract manufacturer. And he didn't want to do that. And so we ultimately were not able to get a deal done with him. So I imagine you might find a similar situation in this one.
And different skill sets of a buyer might, I always worry a little bit about manufacturing businesses. I have to really think about the buyer a little bit more. And have they done manufacturing before? Do they have an engineering type background? That's very different to me than someone who might be wanting to run the skincare, brand and needs the marketing know-how and maybe some e-commerce. We don't know here, but seems like two different people. So you'd either need a team to buy this to really transition and operate it well, or like you said, Bill, maybe it would be more valuable sold as two separate businesses.
Yeah, it might be. I do like that it says the company has a great operating team in place. The other thing that's worth calling out, and I'm sure, Heather, you especially love this as a lender too. The owner is looking for a partner to take the business through its next level of growth. To me, that implies that the guy might stick around, or at the very least, he wants to roll substantial equity. Right? Sell most, but not all of the business.
That's what they're saying, that basically there, that the seller would like to roll some equity, but that's a tricky thing, isn't it? You've got it has to be the right compatibility with that owner. And you really have to understand, what is the owner's role going to transition into? Are they just going to be on the board? That might be easier. I've seen deals where they stayed in the business and sort of, kept the part of the role that they liked, maybe more the technical side, and gave the administrative side to the new buyer. And those don't often work out as well as people hope. They just don't. People don't get along in those kinds of situations. So that can be tricky.
It's hard to go from being the boss to being an employee, isn't it?
It is. And they disagree on changes and how to run the business. And I cringe whenever I hear someone wanting to kind of take a deal and do something like that with it. It could go well, but it usually doesn't.
Well, Mills, you have lived this, have you not?
I am in the middle of living it. On a similar note, I talked to a seller of a business the other day, and he was saying, this is the beginning of the end. And I was like, well, I mean, I don't know that I would think about it that way. They're like, this isn't your death, like this isn't your funeral. And they were like, no, this is a long, slow death for me. And that's legitimately how most sellers, right? Most founders who have been doing something several decades, the identity and the business are all wrapped into one. And then you're going to say, hey, I have some bright ideas. Let me come in and, tell you how you should interact with your customers and collect your receivables differently. I mean, you're striking at the very core of, their human nature and angst there.
Stuff, especially if they've got 20% of the equity still and money on the line.
Yeah. I have a question for y'all on this one that I feel like it may be material or it may just be a little bit of a kind of buzzword, but how significant is it that this says vegan?
Not really. I mean,
but it's marketed as meaning something, right?
Yeah, well, it's not. It's important in marketing. Vegan is not like kosher. So like kosher, you have to have your facility inspected and maintain different tanks and all that stuff, right? Vegan is not that. It's vegan is just assuming like don't put an animal products in the product. Your product is vegan. So that, I mean, they could run boiled animal fat on the next run in the same tanks, and that's not vegan, obviously. But the prior and subsequent products can be vegan.
But wouldn't most cosmetics actually be vegan? Maybe I'm wrong about that.
You would think, Heather. You would.
This is where I wanted to go. This is where I was.
You would think. Explain this.
Most are vegan, right? You would think, what's not vegan? Like there's not, beef tallow in my lipstick.
I'm wondering right now.
But you know what?
Only one of us is wearing makeup right now that I know of. So this is really
worried.
good.
I want to know what's on my face. Actually,
this is apologies to our vegan readers or listeners, but this is the thing about vegans. Bees are animals, and thus beeswax is not vegan.
Okay.
So there are tons of beeswax is the major ingredient in all kinds of things. But if your product has beeswax in it, your product is not vegan. Even though it doesn't kill the beeswax comes from the hive. It's not, you don't murder the bees to get their wax. They make the wax. It is a animal byproduct, and it is not vegan. So what this means is they don't use beeswax in their skincare stuff.
Gotcha.
There are plenty of other options.
If you're just not going to use that formula anyway, it's easy to just throw in the word vegan because you happen to be vegan.
Correct. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. You get vegan almost for free in most skincare unless it's beeswax based.
I have a question more on the marketing side of the brand, the skincare brand. Did the iOS privacy change? Didn't that come along in 2020? Was it? Where you couldn't sort of do the targeted marketing?
It really kicked in late 2021 or early 2022 was when it really ramped.
Okay.
So I don't know.
Do you think it would have affected this?
This feels you would have seen it drop off. I mean, maybe, but I think this is more of a contract manufacturer anyway. I'm betting on something COVID. I still find it strange though, because the things that dropped off a cliff right away on COVID was makeup, lipstick, and all this stuff. I mean, I don't know, maybe face makeup didn't because people were still on Zoom.
I think that's true. I think people actually did, wore more face makeup because, I was working from home prior to COVID. Nobody used Teams or Zoom. In fact, it would have felt a little weird to say, let's do a video chat. People would have thought, what are you doing? And all of a sudden, so here I was, I had to wear more makeup because of COVID because I had to suddenly be seen all the time when I really wasn't before that. So there you have it. So, and I've actually seen, that's also had an impact on med spas as well. Same concept that people started using more med spa treatments as well because of Zoom, because of seeing their face every day.
Wow. I hadn't thought about that because you're right. Pre-COVID, it was all telephone. And then all of a sudden, everybody has to do video. We're doing a freaking video podcast right now. You can go on YouTube and look at our faces. Yeah. Right?
Here we are.
Yeah. Society changed.
Bill, that was real smooth because I know that you're a med spa aficionado.
I am. I'm really into med spas. Yes. Not really as a patient, but as a banker, which is a weird thing, right? That's strange.
A specialty in med. We should do another med spa. Michael and I did one and spoke not intelligently about it. We should do another one with Heather. That'd be fun.
Okay. We should do one at a med spa location, like while you're getting a treatment on your face.
I want to see all of us med spa live on the air. That would be, or like, cucumbers on our eyeballs.
Yes, totally.
That would be awesome. Another thing that's, I think, worth mentioning here on the roll, this is the type of thing you will find more on Axial. And I think you'll find it more on Axial because you tend to see it more in upmarket deals. Because a lot of, if you're a private equity firm buying a business, it's a real vote of confidence that the owner wants to not sell out entirely, right? The private equity firms get really spooked. Like, what does this guy know that I don't know? He must want to stay around because we're going to sell it again in 5 years, right? I get that proverbial second bite of the apple is what they always call it. So I think what you'll see if you're a seller is once if you want to sell to private equity, once you get into the 3, 4, 5 plus million of EBITDA, your buyers are going to start asking for it. And I think it's no coincidence that we're looking on Axial today and we see the owner is not stupid, right? He's probably been advised. Remember, also, he has an investment banker because Axial is a platform for intermediaries, right? So his banker has advised him, hey, look, your buyers are going to expect you to roll. And so he's coming out trying to get in front of it. Just interesting.
And I noticed something about Axial lately too. In my new role at Viso, I've got now 2 deals working they were found on Viso. I mean, sorry, not on Viso, on Axial.
Oh,
Excuse me. And one is big. One is over 2 million EBITDA, or on the bigger side, and one is small. So kind of interesting, just that I'm noticing it more, that people are finding good deals there.
sweet. Yeah, I think they've really come on lately.
Let's talk about this size range. So, and when you're at this kind of, let's just call it $3 million kind of steady state EBITDA, if these numbers are accurate, from a financing perspective, I mean, this is big enough that a private equity firm would look at it certainly as a bolt-on, but also as a platform investment if they have kind of a thesis around this. So kind of have to know who you're competing against if you're not a private equity firm and you're trying to buy something like this. If somebody is looking for maybe their first or second business to buy, and they don't have it's not a strategic investment, they're not doing this to expand geography or product lines. This is kind of a dead zone in a lot of ways, right, for financing at 3 million in EBITDA.
Yeah, I call it a tweener. It's too big for SBA and it's too small for a lot of conventional lending. So it really is, and it affects valuation, because obviously anytime there's less liquidity in an end of the market or an industry or whatever it might be, it has to have it depresses valuation to some degree. Then it also sort of says maybe the seller only sells to a strategic, or because they can only get their value if they do that. If the single standalone buyer that has to use some financing just won't get this deal, maybe.
Yeah, which is why you start to see the break point when you get to a couple million of EBITDA. You start to see that transition from business broker with an email list who you can blast out and anybody on the email list could conceivably do the deal with an SBA loan, to investment banker intermediary, which is what we've got here on Axial, where you've got to find the right acquirer. Like this person's got to think. They can't just blast it out to a list. They've got to approach a targeted set. They've got to market the business in a way that appeals to that targeted set, and so they get it. It's a higher touch process because it's not a blast and anybody can get an SBA loan.
That's right. Exactly.
There's kind of two polar opposite dynamics too. If you talk to people who look at businesses from business brokers, their kind of repeated, gripe is, I signed the NDA, I didn't hear from them, I had to follow up, I never got a response, a month later. Like, it's just very stagnant, and you feel like as the buyer, you're really having to pull to get information, and maybe coaching the broker, coaching the seller, saying, hey, look, here's my pre-approval letter, or here's my whatever. You're kind of having to push the process along. When you move up market and when you work with an investment banker as a buyer, it's completely flipped. It's usually they have a mandate. They're going to take this business to market. They've already coached and prepped the seller for realistic valuation expectations, because the investment banker has sunk cost that's significantly higher than the broker. They're paying their people a lot more. They have a big team of analysts and associates and all this stuff. And they're sending this deal out to, at least several hundred, sometimes thousands of potential buyers, a lot of them professional buyers. And then they are going to build this very tight funnel that you're going to be subjected to. I got a sim for a roofing contractor the other day, and I get like every other day updates from the investment banker about IOI deadlines, LOI process letters, data room updates, and they are pushing me along, and they're wanting, they have a really good idea of how many emails they sent, how many people opened the sim, how many people had management calls, how many people are submitting IOIs, how many people, are going to subscribe to this process. And so it's not a sit back and kind of, see if you can play time to your advantage and build a relationship with the seller and maybe go do a site visit impromptu. I mean, it is very rigid, not a lot of flexibility, hyper competitive. And that works to the investment banker's credit. It works to the seller's credit if they're trying to maximize certainty around the sale process, because everybody either gets in line or they get out of the process altogether. It does not necessarily work to the advantage of the buyer or the business post close, because the guy who gets to the finish line is the guy who can run to the finish line the fastest. So you just have to be aware if and when you move up market and look at deals like this, you're kind of on a little bit different learning curve and a little bit different process overall. It's very interesting. It's very, eye-opening in a lot of ways, because you see how these deals go down, but just be aware.
Yeah. And they're going to give you way more information. They're going to expect you to ask good questions. You better be ready to go, because you're bidding against private equity firms.
Yeah. I noticed it as a lender as well. We had to move much faster to closing. So when you do a conventional loan, you don't do term sheet, underwriting, closing. Underwriting and closing are concurrent. You do term sheet and finish your underwriting and your closing all at the same time, so you can close in 3 weeks.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So the other thing is worth mentioning. So we're assuming this is mostly a contract manufacturer of skincare. I have seen these be incredible businesses. And I have seen it because I have been a customer of, I've spent easily 8 figures with contract skincare manufacturers, in mid 8 figures at least. And the guy, so the one that I've been working with for 8 years now, it got sent around our office. He bought like the second biggest house in Miami, like last year or something. Like the boat is bigger than my house. Like it is bananas, like how much money this makes. And you go and you tour it, and it goes on forever. And they're, making all kinds of stuff, and their margins are great. And they still like make us put 30% down. They give us net 60 on the last 70%, but they still make us 30% down. And we do it because they're a key partner for us. And I know their margins are good on us, but our margins are good on the product they sell to us. It can be such a good business. And in some ways it's an easier business, because you don't have to ship each individual order. You don't have to deal with the branding. You don't have to deal with the go to market, all that stuff. It is very much a B2B business. On the flip side, though, you lose clients in chunks. Like, you can have a lot of customer concentration, and if you lose people, you lose them. So it give or take.
And I think it's cool to see where this type of business sits in the value chain. Bill, like we talk about, I'm so scared of e-commerce because the role brand plays. And it scares me, because it's like, hey, the business could go away overnight. And you're like, yeah, but look at my margins. As you move kind of down the value chain, and as you move down the spectrum in terms of margin and kind of, actual value extraction, I think about the service providers in this space, like 3PL providers that are like a little bit more commoditized. Yeah, there's switching costs and it's a pain, but if, there's a lot of entrants in the 3PL space. People can open up a warehouse, they can get dialed in with some software, and I think, right, I mean, I know I'm oversimplifying this, but the initial capital outlay for 3PL is much lower than this. Contract manufacturing, you've got the building, but you also have all the stuff that goes inside the building, like these, hotlines and stuff that are significantly more expensive. So I like the barriers to entry. And my thought would be, yeah, these probably aren't the only people in the country that can do this, but the actual switching cost for you as their customer is not insignificant, and maybe very limited pool.
So yeah, what's interesting too is these guys know that, and they try to put higher switching costs in place. So typically what happens is you go to them, you say, I want to make in this case, a lipstick. I want these ingredients, etc. They make it for you, and then they own the formula. So you can't
Mhm.
leave them. I mean, you can, but the funny thing is then it's just like an escalating war. All of the contract manufacturers then have reverse formulators. So if you want to leave them, you just go to a new contract manufacturer and they go, oh, we'll reverse engineer it. And they do. So they're constantly reverse engineering each other's own formulas to get around the same way they lock in their customers. But of course, they reverse engineer it and they go, now we own the new formula and you can't leave us unless you do this whole process again. Mills, to your point about 3PLs, this is way harder than a 3PL as far as moat. Not only because of the capex required, but because of the human capital required. I can start a 3PL. I can hire both of you guys and you can come in and be putting stuff in boxes today. Right. And there's a million people who have worked in warehouses and can manage that and all that stuff, but if I open a contract skincare manufacturer, I can't hire Heather as head of quality assurance and Mills as head of machine maintenance, on day one. Maybe Mills, you could do the machine maintenance. I don't know, but
you need like a chemist,
yes,
right? I mean, that's
you
what
need
I'm
a
thinking
formulator, I mean, I just got back from one of our manufacturers, and like one guy is like head of maintenance, and he like understands how all the machines work and like the parts, and the QA is insane. Like the temperature of the building matters. The way you disinfect the tanks matters. I mean, it's the SOP process book on one of these is no joke. So there's a real financial capital, but there's a real human capital, startup costs of these things as well.
Is this FDA regulated? Isn't skincare and makeup FDA?
Yes, FDA. And so, yeah, like you probably have to be an FDA registered facility. I didn't even get into the, regulatory. This is way harder than 3PL.
That's what I love about looking at things like this is you go, wow, this is hard. This is hard. This is hard. This is hard. And yes, those things are true, but no matter what you do, it's going to be hard. I'm a firm believer in that. But all those things that make it hard, the seller, they're doing $3 million in EBITDA. They've already figured out how to navigate those hard things. It's really hard for somebody else who wants to get into this space who isn't doing it yet. And that's a fantastic premise to build, a defensible business position on.
That's why
I like this one a lot.
Yeah, I like it, especially if it's more contract manufacturing. The contract manufacturing space is consolidating. There are a bunch of little ones. There are a number of private equity firms out there that have mandates to roll these up, because a lot of them are very similar, and you can close facilities and get that human capital back out, et cetera. And there's new brands starting all the time. So this is very much a sell the picks to the miners type of business. In the kind of the e-com new brand. I mean, in today's economy, it's easier to start a brand than it ever has been. And a huge part of it is because of this huge increase in available contract manufacturing, which did not exist. I mean, I would say in 1994, when these guys started as a contract manufacturer, the amount of that their industry has grown since then is crazy.
What do you guys think that this sells for?
I'll let Heather go first. I don't know.
I don't know. Oh, that's hard because 3 million EBITDA. I don't know. 8x, 10x. Not too high.
Yeah, I was going to go. I was going to
say at least 15 to 18 million.
Yeah, I was going to go around 6x, 5 to 7 or 8, somewhere in there. So anywhere from kind of 12 to 15 million, I think. Oh no, 12 would be 4x, so probably higher than 15.
If that's the case, right? Even at 15 to 18 million dollars in purchase price with, a nominal amount down, 25% or something like that in equity. And let's say they just have, how far out would the AM go on something like this, Heather? No more than 10 years, right?
No more than 10, probably 7.
And so you're talking about, just rough math. You're talking about probably what, $1.5 million to $2 million a year in debt service.
Mm-hmm. Well, it depends if it is an amortizing loan. You see a lot of these done as interest only or partial amort. We had a loan, a sizable loan from a debt fund, because this is coming from a debt fund, and the amortization was what was it? I think it was a 7-year loan, but the amortization was 2.5% a year. So it was not a fully amortized loan. So there was going to be a big bullet. But the point is, this loan never gets repaid; it gets refinanced. Right.
Right.
Yep.
So it's. I could see, because you're right, Mills. If you had to amortize this thing down over 7 years, it would crush you.
That's kind of what I'm trying to get to is if you're trying to buy this business to operate it, and exit it, you almost have to be an institutional buyer. You almost have to be a professional buyer to be able to get the 0 to 3 or 4% amortization deal. You just can't get it otherwise.
Right. And back to what I said earlier, I guess I sort of contradicted myself. I think you're right. It's like 6, max 8x, because it is in that tweener space and it can't really qualify for the type of financing that people would, an individual buyer would want to use. So it's got a limited, number of buyers that can really pull this off and finance it. So that depresses the value. So now you're back down to maybe 6, 7.
Yeah. And
I changed my mind.
And the reason those loans
You're
are structured
allowed.
that way, they either get refinanced, right, or the business gets sold, typically.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
They almost always are getting sold, and they're like, look, we grew the EBITDA to, $5.8 million, and we got multiple expansion. And so the debt that we're paying off, that principal amount that we didn't pay down at all, it's not quite a rounding error, but it's going to feel like it when you are getting, 8 times $6 million in EBITDA versus, paying, having $15 million of principal outstanding.
Yep.
Any other closing thoughts on this one?
I think it'd be interesting to get a book on. I mean, these contract manufacturers of skincare, I almost like it better as a contract manufacturer than I do as a brand, because there's a million vegan lipsticks in the world, and you would rather not care which one wins because you're manufacturing all of them.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I love it.
All right, let's wrap it up.
All right, guys. Well, thanks. That was fun. And we'll tune in next time, and we should have another good one. We found a couple of sources for some of these larger kind of upmarket deals, and some of these things are fascinating. It's very different than the typical BizBySell stuff we're looking at. Some of these headlines, I was just like, I cannot wait to talk about, the manufacturer of collectible statues and stuff like that.